Today, on the Angry Catholic Show, we're going to tackle a survivor's story. Our angry item of the day is All Are Not Welcome, and a Sports Illustrated issue. Welcome. You're listening to The Angry Catholic Show. I'm Paul the Angry Catholic with my wife Chris and Tommy Furino. Back in 2002, we were all told by the bishops that they were going to fix the abuse problem in the church. Well, in 2013, a priest that our family was close with was arrested in a car with a 15-year-old boy. Last year, Ed Locke, the music director for St. Nicholas Parish in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, was caught on video and text luring what he thought was a 15-year-old boy to his house at midnight. And our bishop still has not told the parishioners why he was removed from ministry. Last October, Father Lockney, who was the first seminarian Bishop Bambera ever ordained to the priesthood, was arrested for luring 2 minor boys to his house. Other than a general statement from the diocese, crickets. But the bishops continue to assure us that they have taken care of the problem. And yet none of the bishops are investigating how this happened and continues to happen. Today, sexual abuse survivors are being re-abused by diocesan authorities who ignore and stonewall those seeking justice. If Catholics don't speak up and get involved, the message from a few can continue to be ignored by the bishops. So here we go. So I first want to thank Tommy Furino for being here in the studio with us. We don't get many guests with us actually in the studio.
Well, first and foremost, I would like to thank you, Paul and Chris and Felix, for having me here this evening. And I'd like to thank my higher power, I choose to call God, for giving me another day in recovery and living a sober life and being able to overcome some of the negative things that I've experienced in my life. And this being one, a lot of times in your life, you feel like, my life anyway, it's been a series in the last 6 decades of trying to learn how to turn lemons into lemonade, taking those negative experiences and turning them into positive ones. Basically, my story goes like this. I joined the United States Air Force in 1979. I went to San Antonio, Texas, Lackland Air Force Base. From Lackland Air Force Base, I went to Chanute Air Force Base, Illinois for tech school. From Chanute, I got stationed in my first duty station and was at Luke Air Force Base in Phoenix, Arizona, and I absolutely love the Air Force. I have to tell you, I had every intention from that point forward. I never felt prouder in my life. Grew up in New York City. It was just a special thing, a special feeling about being connected and believing in this Constitution and believing in my country. And I have to say, believing in my church, because I was active in my church at St. Fidelis. I was fortunate enough to be part of the charismatic Catholic movement in 1976. My aunt brought me to a charismatic Catholic movement where I was sitting with a bunch of little old ladies on a Wednesday night who were praying and reading the Bible. And in the beginning, in the 60s and early 70s, we really, as Catholics, we didn't have really Bibles in the pews. Everything was pretty much pre-prepared for us. So it was nice. It was a very powerful movement, and it really, really drew my love for God more and more and more. Anyway, back to Luke Air Force Base. I was there for 2 years, and I established good friends and had good relationships. I got orders, and I got shipped out to England Air Force Base in Louisiana. Well, while I was at England Air Force Base, I hit a little bit of a mental depression. And I knew that I always got solace when I stayed involved with the church. So I began going to the chapel on the base, and I befriended Father Brian. And Father Brian was the most kindest, gentlest, charismatic man I ever met. He just made me, he was like the older brother that I never had. And I thought, wow, at least I have a friend. I have someone that I can share with and talk about my life. And I loved him. And this is a hard thing for me to mention, but in my childhood, I was molested twice, and I questioned my sexuality. I didn't understand. I knew that I loved women and I loved to be with women. And actually, we're getting really honest, I was still a virgin until I was almost 18 years old. And I loved everything about kissing and being with a woman, but yet I didn't understand quite why this had happened to me 2 times as a child, as a teenager, preteen once, and then as a teenager. And I confided in Brian, and I told Brian all these stories about, how confused I was and why would God allow this to happen to me, and so on and so forth. And it turned out that later on down the road, we came to find out that these were the actual things that were feeding Brian's sickness. I didn't realize that Brian was sick, and he had his own issues that he was dealing with, and I was perfect for the eating, I gather. But anyway, as I befriended him, I began to spend more time with him, and then he began to invite me over to his cabin in Pineville, Louisiana. It was really beautiful down there. It was really, really nice. And I love to cook. I grew up in an Italian and Irish home, and I love to cook. So I used to cook for him. And as the weeks went on, when I would go on the Fridays, I would show up and he would say things. I suffered with migraine headaches back then too. At least I thought I did. It was something that my mother did, and I adapted to my own need for drug abuse. I guess I didn't realize I was an emotionally incapable of setting boundaries 21, 22-year-old child in a man's body. So there's no mea culpa. There's no denying that. But he would start saying, "Oh, you look really stressed this week, and let me give you a back rub." And the first week he'd be through my fatigues, rubbing my neck and rubbing my back, my shoulders, and squeezing my shoulders and my arms, and working his way down my back. A couple of weeks go by. That it made me very uncomfortable. We had this hypervigilance, this razor blades in your belly, I call it, where it felt familiar. It felt like situations that I've been in before, but it created a war within myself, within my mind, my heart, my body. My body was feeling one way. My mind was saying, this doesn't make sense. And my heart was screaming, this is the man of God. What are you panicking about? So after a couple of weeks of the back rubs with my fatigue shirt on, then he recommended, well, take your fatigue shirt off. And then he started doing to my T-shirt, and then he started working his way down both of my legs and rubbing my legs. And again, every time it began to feel more invasive, but yet I did not know how to speak up. And I didn't want to speak up because I didn't want to say anything against my God. I didn't, like this, it's my it's got to be something with my imagination. This is not really happening. So he progressed. It just progressed, and then eventually I'd show up, and he'd say, "What's going on? You don't. Do you have a headache?" And he'd say he was going to give me aspirin, and I don't believe they were aspirin because I would wake up later on that evening or the next day in the spare bedroom in like his gym shorts and one of his shirts. And again, this kind of stuff it continued. It just, when you look at it in hindsight, that it was a slow process. It went from shirt to no shirt to through the pants to no pants to wearing his gym shorts to the rubs coming up and feeling the back of his hand gliding against the side of my testicles. It wasn't right. So I told him, I said, "That's it. I don't want to come no more." So I left. And I didn't want to go there no more. And he showed up at the barracks a couple weeks later, and he said to me, "What's wrong?" I said, "What's wrong?" I said, "You're making me very uncomfortable with these back rubs. I'll come over again, but no more back rubs." So I started hanging out again. Now every week he tried a new approach. He kept telling me how I looked so tense and stressed, and we would drink wine and have dinner or drink beer, and he was always giving me Tylenol, air quotes, aspirin, and I kept passing out, and I'd wake up in the room next door. And as far as I knew, he was never touching me. That went on for a while, but yet somewhere in my belly, I knew something was wrong, but it continued. I went ahead. It was a Sunday afternoon. I remember I had my roommate Gordon's motorcycle that weekend. I woke up in the recliner, and I was in his green gym shorts. I can almost see them. They were like green. I want to say like Kentucky or something. And he was a big guy, so they didn't fit me right. I was a skinny kid. And he was on his knees in front of me, sodomizing, if that's the correct term, whatever. He had parts of me in his mouth but I was still like stupid. So I jumped up and I screamed at him and I cried and I kicked him, and he ran in the bathroom and hid. And I told him some not very nice things, and I was so ashamed and so embarrassed because up to that point, I didn't know if it was really going on or if it was my imagination was making more out of the situation, so on and so forth. So that's what happened. I proceeded to get out of the military early. My airman APR reports went from 9s all the way down to 6s. My attitude, everything about life went terrible. I became addicted to opiates and cocaine and alcohol for years, in and out of trouble, and never wanting to talk about it or discuss it. And in 2002, while I was at the VA in Lebanon, after Wilkes-Barre, I went to the VA in Lebanon, and a guy in the group brought up that he was molested by a priest in the military, and I lost it. I just lost it. I thought I was the only one, and that began my recovery program, where I have to say the Veterans Administration, as far as military sexual trauma, has been so helpful with trying to help me with treatment over the years. I had thought that I had made some kind of peace with this situation, and then in 2018, Josh Shapiro kicked the beehive and the whole Me Too movement and the Weinstein and Epstein and all this stuff, and all those feelings flooded back over me, and I once again went from survivor to victim in my thinking, and I went into serious depression. And I went to the Scranton Diocese, and I met with Mary Jo Polkuskas, and she interviewed me and vetted my story, and she said that she was going to have me meet with Monsignor Muldowney. I was supposed to meet with him next week, and for schedule reasons, he couldn't meet with me. And then I met with her another week later, and the Diocese of Scranton was kind enough to pay for my therapy. They were the only ones at that point who were willing to try to help me. She had also told me that there would probably be some kind of a stipend or offering. I don't know what you want to call it, or a settlement at some point. Well, when it came to a point when they started to deal with people from Scranton who were victims, and from priests in Scranton, their lawyers, I guess, advised them to just kind of cut me off. And I found out later that during this process that the Archdiocese of Scranton was in communication with the Archdiocese of New Orleans, where the priest who molested me was from. And they were also in communication with the Diocese of Las Vegas, where he was presently stationed. And through this process, in the last 4 years of being a plaintiff in a lawsuit against the Archdiocese of New Orleans, we've come to find out that there were several other victims who have come forward, and a couple who have admitted but refuse to come forward of Father Brian. So Father Brian was a sick man. I loved him, and all I ever really wanted was an opportunity to get an apology.
Sure.
Now he passed away. So back here in December, apparently he had passed away, which is heartbreaking as well. So we never really got a chance to get closure. But most importantly, I want to say what breaks my heart in this situation is the position the church has taken, the position that even the Diocese of Scranton. On April 7th, they had a a service for victims, survivors. Now, they know I'm a victim survivor, and they have not made any attempt to contact me or ask me or make me feel welcome at the church. Thank God for the people in my local community, Dorier and Mr. Dave Ty and those folks over at the Nativity Church. They love me. They make me feel welcome. They do whatever they can for me within the community itself. But the church, the people who should care, they don't respond. I have, in the last 2 months, I've called Mary Jo, the victims assistant coordinator, several times, and she just is not returning my calls anymore. It's become a legal hot mess, and nobody wants to touch. You would think that somebody would be supposedly trying to help me serve the church, trying to help me get back involved in the church. That's what I always wanted. I wanted to be a Eucharistic minister. I wanted to be a deacon. And instead of feeling invited in, they have casted me out and aside. And I also have to say, there are some older Catholic folks who don't feel right about me. They don't quite understand the situation, and I'm the devil in white clothes when I say the things that I'm saying, because they don't want to believe that it really happens. And I'm here to tell you, I'm sorry, but it does happen. And I'm here to tell you that I do forgive. I forgive from the bottom of my heart. I just wish we would have had the opportunity to tell him in person. However, Bishop Bambera, I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed in your lack of attempts to communicate. I'm thankful for Monsignor Muldowney and all the times he has sat and helped with me. Other than this violation letter that he had sent down to the Archdiocese of New Orleans, other than that, he had always tried to be there for me. But I realize, just from watching him, that he's in a tough position as well. And it's probably very overwhelming spiritually and emotionally for him. He's dedicated his life to this church.
You're talking about Bishop Bambera?
No, I'm talking about Monsignor Muldowney.
Oh, Monsignor Muldowney.
Yeah. And I'm going to be so bold as to believe that these cases and my cases is one of the reasons that I believe well, I can't say that, but I'm going to say it anyway. One of the reasons he stepped down as Vicar General is it just got too overwhelming, and it's easier for him to take a parish, because he was a sweetheart of a man. You could tell. I'm not a foolish man. I can tell someone who really cares and someone who doesn't. Sure. And Mrs. Pakuskas, I forgive you, but shame on you.
Yeah. Well, it's been our experience, at least in this diocese, that the reason they're having to deal with a situation like this is because they put themselves there. I mean, that's what we found. We keep finding over story after story after story. But I do appreciate you telling us, sharing this story with you. I know that's difficult, but I think people need to hear this. People need to hear the reality of what has happened and what continues to happen in the church. But if we could go back for a moment, when you had said about how uncomfortable you were with as the grooming, touching, back massage got a little more intense, if I'm saying that right, and what came to my mind was if he had not been a priest and you hadn't and your faith hadn't been so important to you, do you think that was
a keystone? For sure.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. If it was any other gentleman, if it was one of my sergeants or somebody else, I would have immediately. It created a spiritual battle within me. Sure. It created a major spiritual battle between my emotions, my heart, and my mind was at war because it's very, very difficult. So. Thank you for having me here this evening, and I'm glad to be part of the show.
All right, you can listen to us on KCRD-FM, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Podbean, Google Play, and Spotify, and find us, as always, at theangrycatholic.com. Send us an email to mail@theangrycatholic.com. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Listening to the Catholic Show. I'm Paul the Angry Catholic with my wife Chris and Tommy Furino. So for our angry item of the day, we came in with all are not welcome. And to get us started, back in, it was, April 7th, I think it was.
A Thursday at noon.
A Thursday at noon, our bishop, Bishop Bambera, had a healing mass for survivors of abuse. So my question that I wanted to start with to Tommy is, what was the invite like? Did you get a formal invitation in like snail mail, or did you get an email? Did the bishop call you personally, or maybe the victim's assistance coordinator reached out to you and said, "Hey, Tommy, we're going to have this healing mass for survivors of abuse. We would like you to be there with us."
Ironically, or maybe not ironically, but no, I was never notified at all, any shape or form. As a matter of fact, I think the people from my parish, a couple of people that I spoke to, didn't even know about it till like a day before it actually happened. And I heard about it afterwards. And after I had heard about it, I had tried to contact the victim's assistance coordinator, who once again didn't return my calls. And since then, I've called one or two other times. So no, I was not invited. And what's most troubling is they have, and I have documents here to show, also voice recordings. They have been supposedly, air quotes, trying to help me since I think it's September of 2018. So it's not like I'm a brand new victim or there was an excuse for not contacting me. Or it goes back to what I said in my story about they made it pretty clear that my issue, according, I guess, to their lawyers, as they're doing with their lawyers, my issue is New Orleans' problem. And New Orleans, as we both know, in August 2020, rather than dealing with, I believe my case was the case that pushed them into bankruptcy. And again, another thing that I find troubling is the fact that they managed to, file bankruptcy, and that separates them from Rome. I mean, even the Pope. Mm-hmm. I mean, why has not Rome stepped in and said, obviously you're not handling this situation? Another example is the vendors, all the churches, all the archdiocese in New Orleans legal teams and vendors are paid month to month. They are being paid by month to month, and victims are still reliving this pain, trying to live like survivors every day. No one is making any effort to try to assist.
Well, I think this goes to show how serious could, in this example, our diocese be about reaching out to survivors and doing the right thing if they didn't invite, and you're not the only survivor that we know that wasn't invited. I mean,
oh yeah,
that they know personally and have a relationship with. So it's not like you have this relationship with the diocese. You would think you would be near the top of the list to reach out to you and say, "Hey, come join us. We're having this healing mass for survivors of abuse. We would love to have you there." How serious
your
can
presence
they be?
is important.
Right. And I told Monsignor Muldowney years ago, because the Scranton Archdiocese, I keep making that mistake. The Scranton Diocese was the only one who was willing to step up and help me. In gratitude, I would prefer they utilize my voice to go out and help in the healing process. Well, utilize me. Don't shun me. Don't push me to the side or act as, utilize me. Let me go out and help others. Let's get closure. Let's all worship together again. That's what my heart of hearts is. I want to feel part of my church family again. Now, I am continuing to try to reach out to the diocese, and I believe I have other interests that I believe that they can help me with as well. And I want to help them. Believe me, when New Orleans acted as if there was nothing, a great man like Monsignor Muldowney stepped up and said, "We'll pay for your therapy." And that really touched my heart, So, but again, in the 4 years, have I talked to Bishop Bambera? No. Has Mary Jo been sincere? No, not necessarily. So they did not invite me. Long and short of it, I was not told anything about it, and it really broke my heart when I heard about it a day or two later.
I think the problem is the church hierarchy at this point is viewing victims and survivors of sexual abuse as a liability rather than as people and brothers and sisters in Christ. And of course, we all know, that's like completely contrary to the gospel. It's contrary to how it's supposed to be. I think in the case, though, of Bishop Bambera, and I guess I'm becoming jaded, for him to step forward and want to bring people in and want to help and want to do that, he'd have to at some point acknowledge that he sat on the board of the University of Scranton and didn't say a word about the fact that Father Al Liberatori was a predator teaching at that university. And as a result, a young boy, a 16-year-old was abused in his office, and 2 other students were sexually harassed and abused on that campus. So I think,
but I think you hit it right there. That's the real reason, or the reason that I believe that whether it's Monsignor Muldowney or the Victims Assistance Coordinator, Bishop Bambera, and on and on and on, the real reason they talk, they'll say things in public that, sound okay. And then there's no follow up. And the reason why they wouldn't use you to help or engage in any meaningful way is because then they'd have to answer these questions.
Well, and
they would have to, we'd have to know, like, Bishop, like, we have a court documented memo that you had issues with Father Al Liberatori, for example, and then he went on to abuse a young boy.
See, only Christ himself was perfect. He was the only one that ever would and never will walk perfect on the earth. We are all sinners by nature. We all make mistakes, and we can all heal together. The thing, like I said, that I find most troubling, and I said this in the beginning of my story, is in 6 decades, I've made a lot of mistakes. Believe me, anyone who knows me knows that I have a history of making mistakes and a troubled past. However, I live in a state of mea culpa. I'm willing to acknowledge what the situation, whatever it is that I did, and I'm willing to take responsibility for what I did, and I'm willing to apologize and move forward. I am learning to make lemons into lemonade. And it's been a long, hard, slow process because we're not just human beings and we're human doings, and we grow spiritually. We are body, mind, and soul. And the church could be our diocese especially could be taking advantage of a victim who is now a survivor and utilizing me to help others.
All right, if you're concerned about these issues, it's very important for us to share this information. Chris and I, along with a group of supporters, publish this show. Want to ask for your help by sharing it. Email it, post it on social media, text it, or just tell somebody about it. You can be sure if you don't, then nothing will change. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. You're listening to The Angry Catholic Show. I'm Paul the Angry Catholic with my wife Chris and Tommy Furino. Now, for our final segment, we came in with a Sports Illustrated issue. And I don't have when was the date of this, Tommy?
It's July 2020. It was
July
written
2020.
and published by Jenny Varentis.
Okay.
Who is a really, really smart and intelligent sports writer. Anybody who knows or follows any of the local sports TV stations or YouTube.
Yeah, and it was kind of surprising and kind of bold that Sports Illustrated would pick this story up, although it does involve the New Orleans Saints. And I'm sure most everybody listening has heard something about this, how they were helping the Archdiocese of New Orleans kind of negotiate this. I guess, it started out as they were, to negotiate, at least what I heard about it, to negotiate the
how to execute the release of the credibly
names.
accused
Right,
list.
right. And then
it was for
the 57 names or something like that.
It was for
of
public
priests that had-
relations,
correct.
and the vice president of communications, the senior VP of communications, Greg Bensel of the New Orleans Saints, talked to the Archbishop Amond, and the owner, Gail Benson, is close with Archbishop Amond and is a Catholic. So they really downplayed the level of involvement, and it might have been not a huge level of involvement, that they were just helping to figure out how to release the credibly accused names and giving some.
And here's another real
support there.
kicker. Excuse me. Another
Sure.
real kicker is that the priest we're talking about was very politically connected with Amon and Gail and all those folks. The very first list that went out, they wouldn't put his name on
Right.
the list because the Brandner story was prior to that. Scotty Brandner, an anesthesiologist who took his life because of the relationship. That Scotty was receiving snail mail letters, love letters from Brian while he was stationed at England Air Force Base. So he was playing the game with me on one hand, and in the meanwhile he was still trying to be involved with Scotty and another young lady victim down in the New Orleans area who was a really good friend of Scotty. And when Scotty crossed paths with her and found out what had happened between her and Brian, it really spun him into a depression, and he took his own life. And I, as a survivor victim of Brian Highfield, can completely relate. Because I will tell you, in the last 3.5 years, I have hit some serious depressed bottoms. If it wasn't for guys like my counselor, social worker, Dave Olkowski, the people at the Department of Veterans Affairs, and Dr. Fellens and Dr. Mazza, the people who have tried to help me in recovery programs, 12-step recovery, I don't know. My wife, how can I not give all the credit to my wife? She deserves, if anybody deserves to be paid for living with a lunatic, she deserves it more than I do. No, seriously. I mean, the things that we have to go through. And again, being a survivor victim, it's practically impossible for you to know how to form a functional relationship. You don't have boundaries. You are naturally very demanding and abusive, and then you feel the guilt of being demanding and abusive, and it's just a whole big cycle. But the thing that's very troubling about this Sports Illustrated issue here in July 2020 that Jenny wrote about is that there were the emails that were going back and forth to determine who should be and who shouldn't be on the list.
Sure. Well, one of the things that was, I guess, it's a question, but it really bothers me, is because the Saints, or at least the owner of the Saints, so downplayed their involvement. And then to turn around when word got out, and now people are asking, well, what was your involvement? And then for them to have these records, the communication between the diocese and the New Orleans Saints sealed in a court so nobody had access to them. I mean, that, to me, that smells. That means to me there's much more involvement here. I mean, because it's public information that the Saints have given tens of millions of dollars to the Catholic Church in the Diocese of New Orleans.
Taking them on trips. They've gone on trips to Europe together. They've gone to Rome together.
The Archbishop.
Cruises, yes. But talk about the power of the pen and the power of words. This went out in July 2020. In August 2020, a month later, was when Father Highfield, which at the time was a Monsignor Highfield, and another priest were added to the list. So, this was within 30 days,
Sure.
They had to finally submit and add the other names that needed to be responsible, or they needed to take responsibility for.
I think as a Catholic to think about this misunderstanding of what piety or religious fervor is, that somehow as a faithful son and daughter of the Catholic Church, you're helping assist your archbishop in some way, offering some help to help him handle the PR and to help him decide who to put on a list and who not. Where's the fervor and the love and the concern, like, for those who have been hurt? and hurt because of their deeply held faith.
Well, and the irony is the origins of the word Catholic means one world whole. We're all universal. We are to be universal of all and all encompassing, omnipotent, omniscient. As God is, we're supposed to be welcoming and loving to all. I don't care, Muslim, Jew, Hindu, Buddhist, none of that should matter. None of that should matter scripturally. And like I said, my own personal journey and my life is that there was no problem in my life until it became a problem, and it couldn't be fixed until I knew it was a problem. You could tell me it was a problem, but it was your problem. It wasn't my problem until it became my problem. Once it became my problem, there was no way to overcome it until I was ready to mea culpa.
This whole crisis, especially after the Summer of Shame, the McCarrick Revelation, this should have been a uniting factor in the church. This is something that everybody should be able to agree on. I mean, it really shouldn't be controversial.
It shouldn't. You people should not have been hurt, and those that covered up should have to account for it. And they should come completely clean and forget about the lawsuits and the litigation and all that other stuff and trying to protect what, really?
Here this goes into clean. One of the I mean, the New Orleans Saints have to be one of the largest businesses in the New Orleans area. I mean, has to be, right?
Well, and why not use your power and influence? It's got to be $1 billion organization, right? NFL team.
You got Reynolds Aluminum, BP, British Petroleum. There's a lot of money down there.
But here you have a business in the community that is helping the diocese to basically to schmooze over what was going on and make it more palatable to the public, and it just doesn't fly.
It's just it's very disheartening. I think there has to come a point. We on this program we criticize the bishops. We try we criticize those in the chancery, but there's a group of Catholics that have influence and power and money and prestige and a voice. There's a whole class, and I'm not in that class, but there are those who are. And we like to talk about it and do articles on, isn't it great, this person, their Catholic faith, they go to Mass every day and they own the saints or something, or and at some point you have to use what you have, and it should be used to help and aid those who were abused. And I don't know, I can't understand why it's being used to help the enabling and the cover-up continue.
I think scripturally, well, first of all, Jesus said you can't serve two masters. Okay, so if you can't serve your spirit if you're serving your ego, you can't serve God if you're serving power. So I think about when his brother James talks about a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. Chapter 1-2 says, consider it joy when you fall into diverse temptations, knowing this, to trying your faith, work patience. Let patience have a perfect work, that you may be perfect and entire, wanting nothing. If any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God. Let him ask in faith, nothing wavering. A double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. So if you're not, I saw today, my wife and I were watching these hearings, and Clay Higgins from Louisiana, ironically, the congressman from Louisiana, looked across at Alexandra Mayorkas and basically tried to give him an out, give him an opportunity to just admit, that he, take responsibility here. Because nothing's going to change for us in any part of our lives. And I think that's the thing that's most disheartening and troubling for me is through survivorship. As a victim, I'll always think like a victim, but as a survivor, through survivorship, I've learned how to take responsibility. I've learned how to say, I'm sorry, that was wrong, or I'm learning. But when you are not willing to look at the elephant in the room there's nothing nobody could do. But like Paul said, what makes this matter worse is how they continue to try to fool the faithful. They continue to try to cover up and lie and fool the faithful. We become so entangled in our own lives, our own jobs, our own work, our own families, our own kids, and our own situation that we don't really take a minute to sit and think about what's really going on here. And don't get mad. I don't do this. I'm not here to be mad or angry. I know you're angry. I'm annoyed. I'm annoyed, but I believe in the healing power of forgiveness and prayer. And I believe that's where we all need to be. And I also believe, you guys, I'm grateful for folks like you. We wouldn't have to be angry if somebody would just accept and take responsibility. So I'm grateful for this show, and I'm really grateful you guys had me here tonight. Thank you, and I wish you blessings and prayers.
Well, let's spend a couple of minutes with you're very active. I wanted to get to this a little earlier, but you're very active in the community, being retired military, Air Force, National Guardsman, but you're serving as a fire police chaplain for Upper Luzerne and Lower Lackawanna counties. You're chaplain in the American Legion, a member of the Greater Pittston American Vets Association. AMVETS.
Funeral
so
service.
Tell us a little bit about what you're doing in the community.
Again, it's been my experience as a selfish human being. The only way to get out of my own way was to serve someone else and be available to serve. You just get a joy. You get a joy, just like what you do here. I'm sure it's your ministry and it's a service to you. There's a feeling you get about being able to serve people, and for me, and the irony is, I've got a love-hate relationship with people because I don't like them. I don't like the way I don't like the way they treat each other. I don't like the way we talk to one another. I don't like the way we act towards each other. But at the same time, I have a natural watchman, as the Bible would call it, watchman kind of a servant's heart. I have a servant's heart. I want to serve. That's why I served in the military, in the Air Force, and in the Army. That's why I serve in the community on fire departments. That's why I serve in the Lions Club. And again, it sounds like I'm blowing smoke. It's really not about all those things, really. Sure. I want to be clear that there's just a joy in serving and helping others. And especially I'd like to do a quick drive-by that being a recovered opiate addict, I have to tell you that serving in the recovery community is big, because Luzerne and Lackawanna County and the rest of the country is really struggling with self-medicating, and all the help we can get, all the prayers we can get. So I thank God for my recovery. I thank God for my life. I thank God for the 12-step fellowships that have given me a life. And I even thank God for Father Brian. I'm sorry, Father Brian. I cannot hate you. I'm just sorry I couldn't help you.
Now, you had said about let's talk about anger a little bit, because I feel this effort, as far as what we're doing, trying to reach as many Catholics or really as many people as we can, so they know the truth, what's really going on. This is an attempt at that, even though it's the Angry Catholic Show. We had no intention of being here longer than a year. It was going to be a year and out. Everybody'd be outraged. They'd run these bad guys out of town, and we'd move on. We'd pack up, close down, and move on. And as we got further and further, it was definitely around that year mark. It was like we haven't even scratched the surface. These stories keep coming in. As an example, a survivor of this same priest had called me yesterday, matter of fact, and had a very similar story of what you were sharing with us. So to hear these stories and to meet you call them victim survivors, it showed us that we can't stop yet. Like, we really can't. When we have a bishop that sits in Scranton and is unwilling to answer some very simple questions, what do you do? We need to reach out. We need people to help share this information with family and friends and coworkers. And we need to have enough people that have enough impact on the diocese so we can start changing. Because if anybody out there thinks that this is over, we're nowhere near the end of this. We're going to hear dozens and dozens and dozens of stories as we go. Like we literally are working now on multiple stories that have happened recently. This isn't 40 years ago. It's not 50 years ago. This is 4 years ago and 10 years ago of things that have gone on in the diocese, and they've handled them the exact same way, similar to what you happened to you.
It's sad, and truth is truth, and what you're doing is definitely a service to the community, and I'm very much appreciated. But I always want to remember that vengeance is God and the power of prayer. Because I could get really angry. I called you this week and I told you some of the things that I was thinking about, how I want to get their attention. But the truth is, we got to believe that God's got this. And I believe God's got you. And God's got you in the right place to speak so that we as a whole, Catholically, can heal. We can heal as a church, as a body, and serve the community.
I think there's no doubt. God has it. But we have to do our part.
Absolutely.
We were kind of put in a situation where Chris and I, a group of supporters, what do we do? Like, we didn't want to do this. This isn't our thing. I drive a truck. We had to do something. And the only thing that we could think of was to throw our hat in the ring and say, look, we're going to talk about this. We're going to have stories of survivors on. We're going to talk about all the things that have happened in the church until enough people wake up, educate themselves. It's all online. You don't have to go very far. You don't have to be some super researcher or academic to find this stuff out. It's all online. Everything we talk about is public information. So hopefully enough people will get involved, and if somebody wants to, get involved and help, you can reach out to us at mail@theangrycatholic.com, and we'd be happy to bring you on board so we can get the word out to as many people as we can.
I'd like to thank you guys again for having me this evening and for participating in your program. God bless you, and prayerfully good night.
Thank you for listening to The Angry Catholic Show. Send us an email to mail@theangrycatholic.com. Don't forget to share this show any way you can. I want to thank all the listeners who sent emails this week. Thank you, Chris, and a special thanks to Tommy Furino. Stay active, stay alert, and stay angry.
This has been a production of Dumb Ox Media, Inc. All rights reserved.